account to start getting paid.
I have already my whiskey with me. I promise I will have at least one glass, which is mine. I know everyone is talking about Scotch and Scottish whiskey. Personally, I prefer Canadian or Japanese. Just in case anyone is wondering. And don't worry, I'm not drowning my sorrows. This topic is not as bad as it sounds. We're going to be talking today about the Mastercard Scam Merchant Monitoring Program, or SMMP. Before we jump into it, just a small housekeeping note. If you have any questions or any comments or anything you wanted me to elaborate a bit more on, please feel free to write it in the meeting chat, and I will do my best to get back to everyone. If your question is off topic or too elaborate and warrants maybe a separate webinar, then we'll just take it offline. So the first thing that I want to cover, and this is a question that everyone is asking, why is Mastercard doing it? What's changed? What prompted them? What was wrong with the world that we had to get another compliance program? And if you ask this from Mastercard, or you look at all of the official publications, so the official line is that we need to basically foster trust in the ecosystem. Or as they said exactly, is that digital commerce only works when people trust what's on the other side of the screen. If we let scammers keep posing as legitimate businesses, we don't just lose money, we lose confidence. We need to secure this trust for the good of the entire digital ecosystem, from consumers to banks and the honest merchants who are trying to grow. So that is the official line. I will be a bit cynical and say I don't trust the official line. I don't think that this is the real reason. Now, is Mastercard concerned about scammers and preventing scam and protecting consumers? Obviously, the answer is yes. But I don't think that this is the main reason on why this program is actually being implemented. I think if we want to actually look at the real reason, about 2 years ago, Visa launched the VAMP program that basically tried to address different issues related to protecting the ecosystem, fighting fraud, fighting scam. And I think as a main competitor of Visa, and as a company that is often judged in comparison to Visa, and Visa is judged in comparison to Mastercard, Mastercard just can't afford to stay on the sidelines and not to have its own program, or not to try and tackle this issue from their point of view. So I think in that regard, this was the main driver and the main reason. And of course, I'm not CEO of Mastercard yet, so I might be wrong, but that's at least my take. The second question that I get asked a lot is, okay, when is this rolling out? When is this happening? So the first thing to understand is that this is not a new program. So it actually started in January, but the changes were so minor that almost nobody noticed this. So in January 26, Mastercard rolled out, as part of this program, a new requirement for the acquirers. It basically meant that they are not allowed to onboard merchants before they scanned their websites. And they needed to scan the website, and if they find an issue, they had a 15-day window to investigate and to remediate. So this mostly affected companies like Stripe that had automated onboarding that allowed merchants to start working before they were reviewed, before due diligence. So the only thing that changed was for companies like that basically forced them to actively scan the website and perform some form of due diligence before letting the merchant process. So this is why for most of the people in the payment space, this kind of flew under the radar. The next milestone is the one that we're going to be talking about today, and that is the July 24 milestone. The July 24 milestone is a very important milestone because there is one very big change that I will touch on that Mastercard is doing that makes the specific date pretty significant. So please remember that July 24, 10 days from now, this enforcement is actually coming into effect. What is this enforcement? What is going to happen? So what basically Mastercard is mandating is that if there are indications that a merchant may be a scam merchant, the acquirer or the PSP or both need to conduct an investigation within 72 hours and submit that investigation results to Mastercard. We'll talk in a second about what exactly does that mean, investigation, but you need to remember, if there is any kind of trigger that identifies a merchant as a potential scam merchant, 72-hour investigation. So that is what is expected to happen starting from the 24th of July. Again, investigation within 72 hours submitted to Mastercard. And that is a very, very tight window. Now, what could be these triggers that would potentially identify a merchant as a potential scam merchant? Let's talk first about general triggers. So general triggers mean triggers that are relevant for all merchant types. So these would be the following. So the first trigger type would be if the merchant has a drop within a 72-hour period of 50% or more in their approval ratio, or if their approval ratio is consistently over time below 30%, so and they have at least 25 transactions, which is nothing. So this would be a trigger. Now, who could be affected by this trigger? For example, a lot of merchants that work with multiple acquirers do apply a mechanism of cascading. So a transaction, if it's not approved with one acquirer or one PSP, would be routed to a different acquirer PSP. A lot of orchestration platforms also use the same methodology. And then usually if you work with 2 or 3 or even more acquirers, the second and the third acquirer are usually getting a lot of junk transactions. So these would be transactions with low approval ratio. So it is possible that if you're working with a cascading model or with a payment orchestration that does cascading for you, you might be getting in the second and in the third or fourth, etc., acquirer or PSP, you are getting to approval ratios below 30%. The second trigger is a GRIP letter from Mastercard. GRIP is the Mastercard program that is basically trying to identify potentially problematic merchants. So this is very similar to Visa's TLD program. The biggest difference is that the TLD program is more of an automated program that relies on AI and machine learning, whereas GRIP tends to involve humans that also conduct investigations. So they tend to be a bit more substantiated than the Visa TLD notices. And if you've gotten a GRIP letter from Mastercard, that means that somebody is already done an investigation and there's a very high likelihood that there is a reason on why they consider you to be a scam merchant. In addition to this, the third trigger is an MMSP alert. MMSP stands for Merchant Monitoring Service Provider. So there's different MMSPs. The biggest is G2, WebShield, may they rest in peace, Ballerine. So these are all MMSPs that different PSPs and different acquirers work with. So if there is any alert that is coming from these organizations flagging a merchant as a potential scam merchant or a merchant that is suspected of conducting illegal activity, these would be triggers for conducting such a review within 72 hours and submitting the results from Mastercard. So up until now, none of this is that extreme. So we've seen in the past, most of these triggers, maybe with the exception of the approval ratio, would have triggered some kind of investigation by most acquirers and PSPs. The big issue here is, first of all, as I've mentioned, the approval ratio, which is something new that was less of a concern in the past. And the next thing that is of concern and is quite different is the new merchant triggers. So these triggers are only relevant for merchants within their first 6 months of activity. And during these 6 months, Mastercard is looking at additional parameters. So the first parameter that they're looking at is issuer fraud reports. So if 2 or more different issuers report at least each one transaction as scam using fraud type 56, which means manipulation of cardholder, that means that this is a trigger and we have to conduct an investigation. So mind you, so that's 2 or more fraud reports type 56 within a period of 6 months. That's a pretty low bar. The second is if there are any chargebacks from at least 2 issuers with documentation that explicitly mentions scam, manipulation, deceit, somebody forced me to do something, or any kind of scam related language, complaint from the cardholder. This will also trigger an investigation. And what in my view is the most problematic trigger, and the one that will flag the most legitimate merchants, is the chargeback plus refund more than 5% rule. So, and this is why I told you, by the way, that the 24 is an important date, because we've been used to, up until now, to look at things on and measure risk performance indicators on a calendric month basis. So we would measure, for example, July, August, September, the sales within that month versus the versus chargebacks versus fraud, etc. What Mastercard is innovating here is that they are looking at it not in a calendric period, but a 30-day rolling period. So if we're starting on the 24th, we're looking at the period between the 24th of July and the period of the 24th of August. That means that almost everyone working with Mastercard needs to change the way they're thinking, needs to change the way their systems are operating and calculating things, because the calendric calculation can really distort your values and the data that you're seeing. So what does this parameter actually look like? So they're taking chargebacks plus refunds together, looking at the count and comparing the count of chargebacks plus refunds against the say approved or accepted sales transactions. And if it's above 5% and you have more than 500 transactions during that period processed, then you have a problem. Now, why is this a big problem? It's a big problem for 2 reasons. I'll tell you first why Mastercard has placed this as a trigger. So the main reason why Mastercard has placed it as a trigger is because Mastercard felt that, or feels that, merchants are using a lot of services like Etoka to basically hide the chargebacks or hide the problem under the rug and sweep it there, and show, like, instead of having chargebacks, to have refunds. So they want to look at both of these things together as an indicator that there is a problem with the merchant. and why I think this is a problem and why it would flag the most legitimate merchants, because a lot of good merchants, and this is how we've also been taught in customer service and support, is if your customer is unhappy, give them their money back, do a refund so they don't do a chargeback, so they're not unhappy, so they don't leave a bad review. And now we're actually, with this Mastercard program, with this trigger, we're actually penalizing merchants for doing the right thing and making sure that their customers are happy. So this is something that I think is very problematic, and I think that this is the trigger that would create the most issues for most merchants, and definitely the legitimate ones. So these are the triggers. Again, any of these triggers means that you need to perform an investigation. PSP, acquirer, needs to perform an investigation, submit the results within 72 hours. This is what we know. Now, we are also faced with some unknowns related to this program. Usually when there's a new program, there's things that the card schemes, Visa with VAMP, Mastercard now with SMMP, there are things that they tell us, there are things that are written, and then there are a lot of things that are not written, are not told. And ask two people, you'll get 4 different opinions about some of these unknowns. So again, I'm telling you my take on this, but that's why you're here. So yeah, so it is my take. The first unknown that we have is how will acquirers react to this? So we've seen in the past with several programs. So what happens when a merchant receives an investigation? So a merchant is flagged, acquirer needs to conduct an investigation. So will the acquirer say, okay, I don't want to investigate, I will just terminate the merchant because I don't want to take a chance? We don't know. Let's say that we have a merchant that every month receives an investigation request, or every 30 days because they do a lot of refunds. What will happen after the 5th or 6th or 10th investigation request in a row? Will the acquirer terminate the merchant, or will they keep on filing investigations that say that they can't find any scam and that the merchant is legitimate? As always, from our experience, what we know is, as you can see in the picture, some acquirers will overreact and start terminating merchants left and right, and other acquirers will just take it as kind of like a cost of doing business and will not freak out and will continue to operate and deal with the situation. It is also important to remember that these investigations also put a lot of operational strain on the acquirer. So the smaller acquirers, if they find themselves that they have to conduct every day 30, 40 investigations, it can also become a very big challenge for them. Operationally, even if the merchants are 100% legitimate, and they may decide to terminate certain merchants simply because they can't justify the extra operational handling, and the merchants are not basically generating enough return on that investment. So this is one big unknown, how people will react. So far from what I'm seeing, I haven't seen any panicked reactions yet, but there's still 10 more days to go until the 24th. Things might change. Now, when Visa, for example, issued the VAMP, I would see a lot of LinkedIn posts. The winter is coming. It's the end of the world. Everything is going to change. Life is over. Somebody kill me. So there were a lot of things on LinkedIn. I haven't seen so many with regards to SMMP. Maybe people are just tired after VAMP, so they cannot be bothered to get panicked and excited anymore. Or people maybe are not aware of it, or people maybe are not taking it so strongly, but it is what it is. I'm not seeing the same panic that I saw with Van. The second unknown that we have is it's really not clear what does an investigation mean. So what does Mastercard expect to see in this investigation? From our experience, what we estimate will happen is that we will need to provide information about the merchant, the business, what is it doing, how is it doing it, what is the customer journey. So this would be one element of this. Another element would be that we would have to prove that the merchant is monitored on a routine basis and that we've conducted all of the ongoing monitoring to show that the merchant is not on a day-to-day basis engaged in scam. If it also depends on the type of trigger, so we'll have to provide some kind of response to the trigger. Why did a certain issuer flag us as fraud? Why could it be that a cardholder wrote scam in the chargeback letter? So there will need to be some kind of relation to this. And what's important to remember here is that this investigation needs to be concluded within 72 hours and submitted to Mastercard. So that means that we don't have a lot of time to work with, especially if the trigger happens during a weekend, for example. So I would recommend that all merchants create sort of a ready pack for dealing with such situations. So for example, you have already a ready pack with all of the information and everything that with the customer journey and explanation about you as a business, etc. So if an investigation happens, you can just within a very short time period, just take that out, send it to the PSP, send it to the acquirer, so they have something to work with. Because if you submit something only after 72 hours, the acquirer or the PSP, they also need some time to go over the information, add some additional information, make sure that you're not saying something stupid that we're all going to regret afterwards, and then submit it to Mastercard. So that is also not clear at the moment whether things that have worked in the past and then we think is best practice, whether that would be acceptable. We also don't know how much back and forth there's going to be with regards to the investigation. So we submit it to Mastercard, and then what happens? So will Mastercard come back to us and ask for additional information? Will they just say, okay, noted, and let us continue? So all of these are up in the air and unknowns, and I guess that with time we will become wiser and we will know a lot more things, and we can share this information with you. So we will probably organize an additional webinar to discuss this topic within 2-3 months after we've had some time to analyze how everyone is reacting to this. We've had some experience, we've probably seen 1 or 2 cases like this, and we have a bit more meat on the bone and information to share with everyone. But if I need to leave you with some best practices or some things that I would recommend that you do is, first is try to see which ones would be relevant for you. So for example, I think it's critical that you assess your approval ratio with each and every acquirer you have an account with, not just overall like a lot of merchants are doing. If you find that you have any acquirer or PSP that you work with where your approval ratio is below 30%, then you need to make difficult decisions. Do you cut that acquirer? Do you, instead of doing cascading, maybe you should do traffic management where you're sending certain bins or certain countries to one acquirer and others to the other, or somehow find a way to push your approval ratio above 30%. In addition to this, if you are a new merchant, if you have more than 6 months less than 6 months processing history with that particular acquirer, check what is your chargeback plus refund ratio, and if it's above 5%, think about what you need to do. The best course of action would be to just lower your processing volume so you don't exceed 500 Mastercard transactions per 30 days until you're out of that 6-month period. This also relates to if you're opening a new account with the new PSP, new acquirer, and you know that in general your chargeback and refund ratio is above 5%, then don't push more than 500 transactions per 30 days to that account until you're past the 6 months period, and then you can increase the volume there. So this means that you do need to be aware of things and to make sure that you are on top of your data and you know what's going on, otherwise you will be flagged. And in addition to this, as I've said, also best practice is prepare this packet of information that is readily available and that you can just click a button and send it across to your PSP or acquirer, so they have the time also to add the information that they have on their end and send it to Mastercard before the 72-hour window passes. If we don't meet the 72-hour deadline, that means termination of your account, at least for Mastercard. So take that into account so you don't get into different situations where you remembered sending it after 71 hours and you expect the acquirer to do something about it. That's it for us. And of course, if you're an existing Fibonacix client and you have additional questions, you want to know how this affects you, you want us to do all of the dirty work and calculate all of these things for you, then just reach out to your client success manager and they will be happy to assist. If you're not a Fibonacix merchant, then what the hell are you waiting for? Then now's the time to apply. And then you can ask your client success manager to help you at looking at all of the data and to make sense of it and to stay compliant. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you very much, guys, and see you in the next one.